Hello and welcome to this edition of the Heritage Minute Special Podcast. I'm your host, Lieutenant Colonel Retired Steve Simon, class of 77. Today I have the honor of speaking with the Academy's command historian, Dr. Brian Laslie.
As a person who does Air Force history, both professionally and then in my own time, I like to think of myself as, the Jeffersonian scholar at the University of Virginia or the Civil War scholar at Gettysburg College. I'm kind of unique in that regards. I'm an Air Force and air power historian at the Air Force Academy, and there's nowhere else I'd rather be than here.
During this conversation, we'll get into his interest in history and the journey that brought him to the Academy. Brian, welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me, and I'm really excited to be here.
Really excited to have you. So you graduated from the Citadel in South Carolina, so you've been involved in the military since the beginning, obviously. What prompted you to go there?
So let me say up front that I was not smart enough to go to any of the academies. That was not going to be an option for me.
Dr. Laslie.
At the time. I started college when I was 17. Which I would think is pretty young, but I remember that I had two of my company mates who were even younger than I was. But the reason that I chose the Citadel was really twofold. Number one, as I said, I started college young. I know that if I had gone to, and I'm from Atlanta, Georgia, if I had gone to UGA or Clemson or South Carolina, in all likelihood, I would have joined a fraternity. And I probably would have drank myself out of college in a semester. So I know that I needed that strictness, that discipline, needed to be part of my college career. The other reason that I went there, I had two friends, and we had gone to middle school together and we had gone to high school together. And one of their dads was a Citadel grad. And so they were both going to go there. And I said, okay, well, I'll go and visit and see what this is all about. And after visiting the campus, I said, yeah, this is where I want to be. This is where I want to go. Incidentally, I also drove by VMI, and just driving by VMI was enough of a reason for me to go, I'm not going to go here.
No,
so the city of Charleston was a big pull. But my two friends and I, we actually went to middle school, high school, and college together, which I think is pretty unusual.
That is awesome. That's very cool. So, when and how did your passion for history begin?
So it actually started at a very young age. I don't think that there's any doubt by the time that I was in second or third grade, I was pretty much on that history path already. And I'll tell you why. In elementary school, I was not a big fan of reading. And incidentally, I was not a big fan of reading stories or fiction books. And I had a teacher that figured this out really early on. And so she handed me a kid's biography of George Patton. And I remember reading in that, and it would have Patton's quotes, but it would have expletive for where he was cursing. And so the word expletive was in the book a lot. And I was like, hey, what is this? And they're like, oh, that's where he's saying a bad word. And I was like, well, this is really cool. I like this.
Now I want to know what those words are.
I want to know what those words are. And so there was the George Patton book. And then my parents gave me a book on the discovery of the Titanic by Robert Ballard. So I would say that these two books that I got in elementary school, George Patton and the discovery of the Titanic, kind of set me on that course for history. I mean, from that moment on, I was going to have a history book on me at all times.
Nice. And we saw a lecture with Dr. Ballard up in Denver last year. So it was really fascinating. Fascinating stories.
I still have that book, as a matter of fact. I've carted that book around for decades now.
Nice. So obviously history, a big part of your life. So then you went into the Air Force after you graduated from Citadel, correct?
That's correct.
So what'd you do during your active duty career?
So I did 6 years active duty. I started out at Holloman Air Force Base in New Mexico. At the time, home of the F-117. So that was pretty cool to be around that particular aircraft. And I think the history of that plane also kind of helped shape my writing. And we'll talk about that here in a little bit.
Yeah.
I actually didn't work on the ops side. I was in logistics, and I worked at what was known as Bear Base. So basic expeditionary airfield resources. So we had tent cities, Humvees, deuce and a halves. And this was in the immediate aftermath of 9/11.
Okay.
And so we were deploying those things all over USAFA and CENTCOM. And it was a great place to kind of cut your teeth and learn how to be a young officer. Now, from there, I went to Maxwell. which again, as I guess you would say, an aspiring historian, was just a terrific place to be.
The place to be, yeah.
And so learning about the history of the Air Corps Tactical School, of the base, of the Wright brothers being down there, it was just a terrific place to be. But it was while at Maxwell, I think I kind of got the teaching bug. Okay. I was teaching at the now defunct Air and Space Basic course. So teaching new second lieutenants when I was a junior captain, but it was a great place to be. And I think that kind of set me on the path of, I really enjoy writing, I really enjoy researching, and I really enjoy teaching. Maybe grad school's in my future.
There you go. Okay. So then you said 6 years active duty, and then
separated from there.
What happened?
Decided to go to Kansas State University to get my PhD. I got my master's while I was on active duty, but decided to go to Kansas State University. I'm often asked, why did I pick Kansas State University? And the short answer is, of all the PhD schools I applied to, they let me in. But it was a great place. I love Manhattan. I studied under the great air power historian Donald Mrozik. He was my major professor. So I had a great time there and was really only there for 2.5 years doing my coursework and my studies and all of the testing that goes along with grad school. And then leaving there with what we call all but dissertation. So I had everything but my dissertation done.
Okay. So that got you focused into the eventually the Air Force history program from there.
Yeah, so it was military history focused. I kind of emphasized that I wanted to study the history of aviation and air power and space power while I was there. But I left there, again, not having the dissertation done. That's a big thing because you're not going to get hired as a professor somewhere unless you've got what they say dissertation in hand.
Right.
But I needed to go back to work at that point. Like just sitting around researching was not an option. I needed a paycheck. And it was actually my father-in-law who said, hey, the Air Force has historians. They have people that do this job full time. And so I went to USA Jobs and started digging around and saw that the Air Force did indeed have professional historians. And so I started applying at various bases all around the United States. And I got lucky enough to get hired and picked up to be the first fighter wing historian at Langley Air Force Base. So that was my first civilian job, which is obviously co-located with Air Combat Command, which helped when I finally picked a dissertation topic.
Okay, brilliant. So you mentioned your father-in-law. So we discovered this fun fact a couple of years ago that we have a link. One that makes me feel old is that you are married to the daughter of an Academy classmate of mine. So how did you and she meet?
So my wife went to Colorado State University. My father-in-law is Academy class of 1977.
Yay.
Heather and I actually met on active duty. We were both lieutenants at the time.
Oh, nice.
And as cliche as it is to say this, we actually met at a company grade officer council meeting. One of our mutual friends introduced us.
Love it.
And that was it. It was the rest, as I say, is history. Okay. But I do remember her parents coming down when we were still kind of laboring under the delusion that we were friends and not actually dating. But I met her dad, who was an Academy grad, and she remembers specifically that he asked me where I went to college. I said the Citadel, and he said, oh, that's a really tough school. And she was surprised because she had never heard him say anything about any other college other than the Academy.
The Air Force Academy. So, well, so something else you and I have in common that we both met and married active duty Air Force officers. So that's a cool thing. So so that Academy connection, did that have anything to do with you eventually coming here?
Yeah, on a number of levels, really. Obviously, I said that my father-in-law pointed me in the direction of the Air Force history program. So I really have to credit him with giving me the insight into something that I did not know exist, which was the Federal Historian Program.
Sure.
And it has proved to be just a terrific career for me. So even getting into the program, I think, was a large part of his doing. And then they still live here in Colorado Springs. They live a couple of streets over from us.
Nice.
So after having spent 3 years at Langley, looking for, it's time to move on and move up in the history program, the deputy command slot at NORAD and NORTHCOM opened up. And so knowing that that was a promotion for me, knowing that that would be good for the history career field, I would get the joint flavor. I would get the binational stuff. And then also being able to kind of come back to what my wife considers to be her hometown. So yeah, her family being here definitely drove us in this direction.
That makes sense. So yeah, next time I see your father-in-law, say hi for me.
I will do that.
So obviously now you're the Academy's command historian. So tell us about that. Like, what are your primary duties?
It is, without a doubt, the best job in the United States Air Force. My primary duties are first and foremost writing the annual history of the United States Air Force Academy. So the who, what, when, where, why of everything that goes on at this great institution in an academic year is my primary responsibility. So as you can probably guess, we are either actively writing one year's history or actively researching the next year's history. So we do this academic year. Most other Air Force historians do a calendar year, or they'll even do a commander's tenure history. We just find that obviously following the cadets in their annual year makes it that much easier for what we do.
Makes sense here.
So writing the command history is the bread and butter of what I do.
Okay.
Outside of that, it's being responsible for the nearly 60-year institutional history of the Academy. And my office literally has every history all the way back to the beginning, 1954, 1955. We're talking the inception of the Academy going forward. What's the purpose of having those? Well, hey, did we always know that the chapel leaked? Well, yeah, we did. We knew when we built the thing back in the 1960s that you can either have it on time or you can have it and it'll leak. And so having all of those type of documents. So answering requests for information from the superintendent, the vice, the dean, the commandant, I would say outside of writing the history is probably the thing that keeps us the most busy. But there are other aspects of this job that I get to do that I think are just a lot of fun. Working with the athletic department on the Air Power Heritage uniforms, teaching part-time in the history department, getting to lead senior history majors through their capstone thesis. There are a lot of things. Obviously, the Academy is a unique Air Force installation, but there are a lot of things that I get to do as the historian that other historians don't get to do.
Sure. Oh, cool. Well, I can say as a researcher and a writer, you know, this day in Academy history and checkpoints and Heritage Minute stuff, that those annual histories are a very valuable resource.
Well, I will say, and I want all of your listeners to know this, that when I have an Air Force Academy history question I cannot answer, Steve is the first person I call. I might be the command historian, but he's the real Academy historian around here.
You're too kind. Thank you very much for saying that. I really appreciate it. So you've you mentioned writing, so let's get into that. You've written 5 books, I
That's
believe?
correct.
So,
yeah, five as of this year.
Okay.
So I mentioned going to the first fighter wing ABD, all but dissertation, and not having a dissertation. And so the PhD, that's kind of your union card for entering into academia. You have to finish that. I did not have a topic. I did not know what I wanted to write on, but I was actually over at the ACC history office, saw the complete histories of Operation Red Flag. And I said, well, hey, that's pretty interesting. Let's start flipping through those. And so in the grand scheme of Air Force history, Vietnam bad, Desert Storm good. Well, what happened in the intervening years? And that was what became my dissertation, which was a history of the study of how the Air Force trained for combat after Vietnam. Focused heavily on Red Flag, but looked at things like the Red Eagles, creation of doc statements, and things like that. But that dissertation became my first book, The Air Force Way of War. Now, I will say that after I had finished the dissertation and after I had gone through the publishing of the book with the University Press of Kentucky, I said, I'm never going to do this again. I'm done. I don't want to do it anymore. And then I got lucky enough to be selected as a civilian to go to Air Command and Staff College.
Okay.
Well, my family stayed here. So I got a lot of free time on my hands. I'm either going to use this constructively or not constructively. And so being down at Maxwell, I went back to the Historical Research Agency, back into the archives, ended up writing a book called Architect of Air Power, which was a biography of General Lawrence Cuter. Okay, Cuter is one of these individuals whose name pops up all over the place. His fingers are kind of everywhere in the history of the Air Force. Instructor at the Air Corps Tactical School, bombardment wing commander, head of Far East Air Forces, PACAF, second commander of NORAD. He's kind of everywhere. And I said, I don't care if no one else cares about this guy. I'm going to write a biography about him. And I was right. No one else cared about it, but I had done it. Incidentally, he is buried here at the United States Air Force Academy.
We have a lot of his documents here,
We have all of his documents.
That's what I thought.
Yeah, a lot of the research for that
special collections
was done in special collections here because his wife Ethel saved everything they ever got their hands on.
Good for her.
So everything from his West Point diploma to literally his first gray hair to all of the letters they ever sent each other, all the way through all of his correspondence while at NORAD is all here at the Academy.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
And so that was my second book. And then after that, I kind of decided, okay, maybe I'm not so bad at this. Maybe I'll keep doing this writing thing. And so in my spare time, I'm always researching and writing something else to do with Air Force or air power history. So I've done a book on air power in Vietnam. Hat tip to another class of 77 member, Mark Clodfelter, for the inspiration for that.
Awesome historian himself.
Great individual, great historian, and great basketball fan if you ever get to chat with him for more than 5 minutes. So did the history of the Air Force in Vietnam, did a complete history of the Air Force from the beginnings through today called Fighting from Above, a combat history of the Air Force. And then this year did kind of a smaller book on the history of air power and Operation Allied Force. And that was simply, I kind of looked around and said, there's not a lot of books on Allied Force. We're still, historically speaking, pretty close to the event, 20 years on. And so I've just found that this is what I enjoy doing. I enjoy being a historian, and I enjoy researching and writing about air power history.
Well, and you're obviously very good at it.
Well, thank you.
So we're just about out of time. I'd like to get your final thoughts. But first, a word of thanks to our listeners and to let everyone know that Heritage Minutes and Heritage Minutes specials are all available anytime at usafa.org/heritage hub. That's usafa.org/heritage hub. Heritage Minutes published the first and third Sundays in audio and video. Heritage Minutes specials like this one drop the second and fourth Sunday of every month. You can also find us by searching Heritage Minutes on YouTube, and you can catch This Day in Air Force Academy History every day on KAFA, the Academy's radio station, 97.7 FM, or online at usafa.edu/radio. All right, as I know, writers got to be writing. So what's your next project?
So I'm actually turning away from Air Force history. I'm doing a naval air power history, putting the final touches, and it comes out later this year on a book called The Sundowners, about Carrier Air Group 11 and their 2 tours of duty during the Second World War in the Pacific. So flying first from Guadalcanal and then flying from the USS Hornet in 1944 and 1945. And so this is my first book of naval air power history.
What prompted the change?
I kind of got asked to do it. There was someone had mentioned that this particular unit was out there and maybe someone should write about it. And they had kind of asked around and got my name. And then I also found one of the relatives of one of the members of the original air group who had done tons of interviews and collected diaries. And so there was just this absolute plethora of information to draw from. And what really drew me to this particular project was that this air group is not at Coral Sea. They're not at Midway. They're only at the tail end of Leyte Gulf, and they're not at the Philippine Sea. So they're not at what we consider these big principal battles, but they are flying the line day in and day out, up the slot at Guadalcanal, all over the Pacific in the later stages of World War II. So they miss these big battles, but I really like that this story of Air Group 11 and the Sundowners kind of filled in the blanks for me of what was going on in the Pacific.
Okay, sort of the unsung heroes or uncelebrated.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
Well, nice. Well, good for you for that. Look forward to seeing that when it comes out. So, any other final words to our audience before we wrap this up?
As the command historian here at the United States Air Force Academy, I love the craft of history. And I approach my job and my writing, I think, the same way that an actor or a musician approaches their craft. The art of being a historian is very important to me. And I consider myself uniquely blessed and very lucky to be here at the Air Force Academy. As a person who does Air Force history, both professionally and then in my own time, I like to think of myself as, the Jeffersonian scholar at the University of Virginia or the Civil War scholar at Gettysburg College. I'm kind of unique in that regards. I'm an Air Force and air power historian at the Air Force Academy, and there's nowhere else I'd rather be than here.
Well, good. And we're lucky to have you. I believe that sincerely. So thank you so much for coming in today. And,
well, thanks for having me. Happy to be here again.
Thank you, Brian. The Heritage Minute series and Heritage Minute specials, like this one, are available in video and audio at our new Heritage Hub on the Association of Graduates website. Go to usafa.org/Heritage Hub and watch or listen anytime, or catch up on the Heritage Minutes you might have missed, and subscribe while you're there. Keeping up with the series is easy. Search at Air Force Grads on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and more for show announcements and updates. I'm Steve Simon. Thanks for listening.